Hello, welcome to the November 9th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo. I'm going to do a quick audio test and then we'll get started in just a couple of moments. Bear with me just for a second. Hello, welcome to the November 9th. Okay, so as I said, my name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. I'm presenting from the United States outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. If you have not attended a Club Cubase live stream before, how it works is you could ask questions in the live chat field or submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, so especially if it's a little more involved. So that's always appreciated. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner, I'll try to catch up to like the live stream, but often the discussion will be well ahead. I'll try to go through each of the questions chronologically and answer them as completely and succinctly as possible. But if you don't get an immediate response to your question, please wait. And if we could refrain and try not to ask the same question repeatedly, that would be helpful. Just that could kind of slow down the whole process. A couple people want to thank who help out with the Club Cubase community. So we have two people that serve as moderators. So we have Jazz Dude and Agent K. So they're not Steinberg employees, they're not official. They just kind of do this. They're not official Steinberg employees. They just kind of help out the community. So kudos to them. Also, if you wanted to find the topics that are covered in today's live stream, you could go to the comments field and pin to the top with timestamps will be all the topics covered in today's live stream. So you could look there, but if you wanted to look through topics that have been covered in previous live streams, I think we're past 14,000 questions at this point since the pandemic started. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to set that up. It's a wonderful resource. And another wonderful resource of information in addition to all of the Steinberg official channels is going to be the Cubase Nation Discord. So, and Jazz Dude does a lot of work compiling information there. So with that, I may be interrupted at some point. You may hear my wife, who's working directly above me, as she's doing her work, and my son may be getting home from school the last 30 minutes of the live stream. I'll try to avoid any interruptions and keep those to a minimal, but let's go ahead and get started. So we have a lot of people already online. Okay, so the first question from Joe K. I left a feature on to delete overlaps by accident and grouped my drum tracks for recording. I didn't realize that it was losing all of my previous takes in the lanes. Can I restore those takes? So let's go ahead and just take a look. And so if we have delete overlaps, sometimes when people are doing editing, and this is a preference if you're not familiar with it, if you go to the preferences and go to editing, that you could enable delete overlaps. So if we were doing editing, let's say, where we had a lot of different overlaps, so let's say, okay, if I come here and I've selected different takes, and at this point I want to, at this point, just say, as we do this, that when we have no information or when audio is overlapping, that it would get rid of the unused area so we don't see it visually. But I think that once you do this, all of that data, even if it's not really visible, is still there. So depending on the situation, you may be able to just kind of restore it. So even if I wanted to come to the very top here, we could just kind of restore, different sections, kind of just like this. So, if I just said, okay, let's just take this, and while we don't have the overlaps there, we can just kind of come over here and still restore. And this was all kind of recorded in one contiguous take. But if you wanted to even just kind of come over here, all of the audio, I believe, will be on the particular system still. So you may just, if you're unable to kind of restore the individual parts, so even if I just wanted to come here, we could restore these different components. But if you go to the audio to the pool window, so let's go, to the media and go to our pool window. At this point, we could choose and you could see all of the different takes and you could drag these out, but these will be the full audio file. So while it deletes those, it doesn't delete that from the audio. That audio is on the computer and probably referenced in the audio pool until you physically come into the pool and remove unused files. So if you haven't done that, then all the information should be directly in the pool that you could drag out as well. Okay, so we just see, all right, so we see Matthew Elston from London, kind of got his new PC install working without any problems. So that's great. And we have a question, says, please, when I use, this is from Matthew Elston as well, when I use Hallian Sonic, get stems from the MIDI drums as kick, snare, etc. in my mixer. And when I export, I have started using Groove Agent as you recommended. Is it possible? So let's say if we wanted to come over here to Groove Agent, and I'll just have this play a particular pattern. So let's say I have this pattern going right now. We see that all the different sounds are being mixed together out of a stereo output. So if I go to the mixer, and this could change depending on if you're using an acoustic agent or a beat agent. So with an acoustic agent, Groove Agent will have up to 32 stereo outputs. I could say, let's take the kick out of output 2. And I can see my kick, and let's say, okay, I want the snare out of output 3, my hi-hat output 4. Let's put the overheads on output 5 and output 6. So now we could have all of our drums kind of bust out appropriately here. So and as soon as we do this, now we could, see all this. Now, some people ask, where do I see the outputs, like for drawing in automation on a project window? If you click on the little show hide automation, we'll now see all the different outputs automatically accommodated for. So when we do an export, all of those will match. Now, if we're the output routing, so that's where an acoustic agent, if we were doing a like a beat agent, it's going to be slightly different. So let's say, okay, if I'm just looking at a quick beat agent kit, so we'll come over here, and so as we'll come to, so now these will all be going to mix to one stereo output. But again, each instance of Groove Agent SE or Groove Agent will have 32 stereo outs, but I could now come over here and say, okay, this, and we'll see it go to kit mix. So at this point I can say, let's send this to output 2, and I want the snare going to output 3, and the rim shot, let's say that's going to output 3 as well, and I want the hi-hat going to output 4. So now as I come here, we could see the outputs kind of automatically changing. To the different outputs. So here we would go to the instrument, select edit, and then we could choose our outputs directly here. So, so two different approaches depending on what kit you're starting with. All right, so we see Kerwin Young on the live stream. It's going to pop out my chat onto its own window here. Sorry about that. All right, I think when I popped out my chat, I may have lost a couple of questions. So I think, so I apologize for that. Let me see if I pop the chat back, if I could. Let me just show live chat. Okay. So I think I may have lost a couple questions, but I think one that I had saw, I just was reading Kerwin's saying that he liked, he's been playing with the sample editor in Pad Shop and enjoying that. So I may have lost a couple, but I think there was a question from Marcos about if using a USB mixer would be considered kind of a hybrid workflow. So, generally a hybrid workflow, most people, I don't think when people think of hybrid workflows is if you're kind of looking for, an analog sound, while you could get that, most USB mixers kind of just output, like the one I'm using for this particular live stream just takes, the stereo out and mimics the stereo out to the computer. So while it's analog and I'm getting, like I could adjust EQ and I have a one knob compressor on this mixer, I wouldn't really consider that kind of a hybrid workflow. What I would consider a hybrid workflow is when you have the choice of, utilizing processing in the box or outside of the box. So that would kind of be what my perception, and I think what clients' perceptions and what most engineers' perceptions would be, so that if you had, a Lexicon 960L reverb, that you had the ability to use that in conjunction with your other plugins and software, and kind of using a combination of software and hardware. So I'm sorry if I lost a couple questions. So if you asked a question, we're going to kind of start off with, so the timestamp I'm starting is like 12:56. So sorry if I lost a couple questions. Okay, so we see Cedric on, all right, and we see Jay from Connecticut. All right, so we have a question. Please, could we have Dorco as the score editor in Cubase? Pretty please. So I know that there's, been a lot of, desires for people wanting the Dorco score editor in Cubase. I know that both development teams are aware of that desire. So who knows what we'll see in the future. So, but I'll make sure that it gets passed along to both development teams. But I'm sure that a lot of those people are kind of already working on it, and they want the same thing, to kind of have more integration between the two programs. All right, so I think most of us are learning that in India they have half hours for time zones, so that's good. All right, we see Graham Richer on the live stream, so thanks for joining us. All right, we see Tim from Mission Viejo. We have Nick, as well as Soren from Sweden. All right, we have Johnny Ray from the Bay Area. And we have Israel. All right, so we have a question from Dallas LaRue. I have a song on an old laptop in Cubase 7. Is there a way to get it into a Cubase 11 project, not just a file, but where I could edit the tracks? So the actual files between, Cubase 7 and Cubase 11, as long as you have that, on a drive or something like that. So I think I have even a Cubase 6 project. So let's say if I come over here to this project, And I'll just select the comping. Like this one was originally created in Cubase 6, but I could just still open up the project that was created in Cubase 6 and be able to play it directly inside of Cubase 11. So the project, the project file format hasn't changed between then. So you could actually open up a Cubase SX1 from 2002 directly into, so it's the same exact project file format. There's been no changes with that. All right, so John Costigan wants people to remember to give a thumbs up. All right, we have Michael Pierce on the live stream as well. Thanks for joining us. He's from outside of London. All right, so one of the questions that I remembered that someone had asked that may have gotten lost, I'll just kind of jump back to this, was that I'd read before the live stream started, was how to have the actual, like, to look at a part in the MIDI editor and the score editor simultaneously. So let's say if I double click and I go to my MIDI editor for this particular part. So let's say I'll just solo this. And I'll make this a little louder so everyone could. All right, so the question was how to see this part in both the MIDI editor and the score editor simultaneously. So let's say if I wanted to, and there's a little preference to be aware of, where we could, once you go to editors, where you could say editor content follows event selection. So try to uncheck that particular preference. So again, preferences to editors, editor content follows event selection. So now at this point, I could play this and say, okay, I want it. And I think the question was how to have the key editor on top and maybe the score editor on the bottom. So as I play, I can now just come over here to the window, and then we could see kind of the score editor and the key editor simultaneously. So that's how you could do that. So the little preference to be aware of, again, is preferences to editors, and unchecking editor content follows event selection. And then you could see, and if you wanted to toggle those, you could do that as well. So that's how you could see a MIDI part in both the key editor and score editor simultaneously. Okay, so we have a question from Soren. Is there any way to get drum editor styled options and really anything else possible to multiple note grid length within the key editor? It'd save me repeated MIDI drags. It'd be amazing. All right, so just kind of reading this. So one thing that you can do, Soren, that a lot of people don't realize is, let's say if I look at this in the drum editor, okay, so we could look at this, maybe like, okay, I wanted to look at this in my drum grid, and a lot of people may not do editing in the drum editor here because it may not show the length of particular notes. So I think let's say if I filter this, and there is a little option. Let me see if I could find it here. So let's say, so if we look at this little icon here, we can say show the note length. So at this point, we could just change the length of different notes. So, if you wanted to do more of kind of like a hybrid approach for this, you could say, okay, I wanted to just see the actual like drum grid with the little diamonds that, indicate where the note starts, which is really critical for drums. But if you're doing kind of more programming, I remember one time talking with the great session Leon Russell. He's a Cubase user, and he's like, why doesn't the drum part start right here? Why is it at the diamond? But if you wanted to see the length of these particular notes for different editing tasks, you could click on this little icon here, and that will show the note length, and then you could adjust the length of different notes and still kind of have it all within kind of the drum editing environment. So try just that little icon right there, Soren, and see if that works. Okay, and and we have a second question. It says, sorry to raise an NI question, but it's related. Is there a way to use Agent to narrow NI contact libraries to narrow key editor to keys library preset utilizes? So, a lot of times, it's kind of, even if a instrument is only being utilized here, we could actually, so you could actually just kind of set the particular, so it's going to, generally the MIDI editor here will show kind of, the entire range of MIDI notes available. So let's say even if it was a sample library and it stopped at C1, you may have notes, or let's say E1, you may have notes below that are set up for different key switches. So I don't know a way to automatically, filter notes that aren't available within the particular instrument, and that could change, if you switched instruments at any particular time. One thing that people will often do within the key editor is, just say show pitches with events, and that will only show you that way, but it doesn't have a way of, filtering out, notes that aren't playable on a particular instrument, because it shows, as per the MIDI specification, it'll kind of show all available MIDI notes. But I could see where it might be an option to maybe just drag up to have the notes within a specific range. But then again, even if notes are within, playable notes are within a range, there are often different notes that are set up for MIDI key switches to switch articulations, like in sample instruments like strings and winds. All right, so we have Peter from Montreal checking in. So we see, hey Greg, so question, is there a gain volume tool plugin in Cubase like other DAWs have? I set the pre-gain volume in the mixer, minus 18 dB, but walks to 0 dB in no time. It's hard to handle the volume after boosting. So anytime that you go to a particular instrument here, so let's say if I go to this audio, there is once you go to the particular instrument, let's say we go to the EQ window, there is a pre-section. And here you could have gain, and you could adjust, I think it's 48 dB up or 48 dB down. So you could adjust the gain, like pre-gain directly there. So give that a try, and then this will have no effect, so if I needed to add less gain and not affect the gain structure of the mix console, I could adjust this independently on each track. And if you were doing it in the large screen mixer, you would just go to the racks and make sure that pre is activated, and then you could adjust the pre-gain level directly there. So let me know if that works for you. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. I'd like to know if there's a way to change the BPM of an entire project with all audio tracks at once. So yeah, once the tracks or the files themselves are in musical mode. So let's say if I wanted to go to this famous project now, courtesy of Fred Corey, who's on the last live stream. So let's say I want to take this project, which is at a tempo of 100 BPM. Okay. And I want it to, just gonna adjust my chair. And I wanted to change all the tempo. So I'm going to select all the events and place them into musical mode. And we'll see this little music note indicating that these tracks are in musical mode. So now we're at 100 beats per minute. And all I have to do is, now that all the tracks are in musical mode, I could just place this and say, okay, I want it to be 140. I want it to be 88 or 108. So now whatever tempo I kind of type in. So, you know, if the audio is time stamped or tempo stamped, which most audio, if you record the audio into Cubase, it will be automatically based on the tempo, then place it into musical mode and change it to tempo globally, and all the tracks that are set to musical mode will now play back at the new tempo. Okay, so we have a question from Robbie Bowling from Dallas. My chat field just jumped on me. Okay, what is the best and most efficient way to share effects, an effects channel or question mark, and how do you alter the amounts to each track? All right, so let's say if I wanted to, so if you wanted to share effects, we could come directly over here and we could just say, let's add an effects channel. So let's say I wanted to add a reverb. So I will come directly here. Let's add just a quick revelation reverb. Okay, so now that this is done, so some people will put, you know, multiple reverbs as inserts, like across all the different drum tracks, and adjust the amount. And that's probably not the wisest thing, because what you could do now is just come over here. So let's say I want to take the snare, and now I could activate the revelation bus here. And I want to take the snare, and as we do this, I'm going to turn it on. So we can make it more dry, and then we could send more to the reverb and blend that reverb in. So let's say if I go to the kick, I may want just a touch of reverb here, and then we could just come over here and say as a kick. And let's say, okay, if I go to the guitars, and that way you could take one reverb and just kind of share it across multiple tracks. Now, if you wanted to do this quickly for multiple tracks, one easy way of doing this is, let's say I wanted to add a second reverb. I could select all these tracks, like all my drums, and I could say, let's add an effects channel to the selected track. So let's say I'll now add a reverence. And now we could add those across all of our tracks. And as we go to activate, you know, we could now just come over here and, you know, just have that, you know, that effects end available just like that. So just use an effects channel and then use the sends. And if you're looking at the full channel view, you would just see the sends here. Now, as you move it to the right, that blends more of the effect in with the original dry signal. So that's how you could do it, Robbie. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining the live stream. And if you learned something new in the live stream, throughout the live stream, make sure that you do actually hit the like button. And that allows us to continue to do these live streams. All right, and we have Jarlath from the UK joining, so thanks for being there. Okay, so I just see a question from Greg McCarty. I think Greg was on our very first live stream from Portland area in Oregon. So it says, once I tweak my sampler track, how do I get it into my project? So, if we kind of start off with a sampler track, so if we add a sample track here, we could add kind of an empty sampler track, and we'll see that once that is selected, we can just see this little empty area here. I could take any audio file and just kind of drag it in. So let's say if we've tweaked it, really then all you have to do to open it in other projects, so if we've done this and we save the project, this will be saved in this particular project. But if we go, wow, this is a really great drum sample that I did or a bass sample, and I want to utilize it in other projects, we could just go to the preset management and we could save a track preset. So let's come over here. Okay, so and now I will just come over here, and then when we go to the media bay, you could just say, okay, I want it to go to user presets, track presets, sampler, and we'll say, okay, this is my Greg McCarty preset, and then I could just drag it in, and all the settings that I've done will automatically be saved. So just save it as a track preset, and then you could call it up in any other project. But as soon as you create the sampler track and you save the project, that will be saved within the particular project as well. All right, great to see the Cube from Melbourne, Florida joining us. Glad you got your chord pad sorted out. Okay, so we see a question. Any ideas how to get rid of short instance of white noise coming through my M audio interface? Very short, but very loud instance of white noise. So a lot of times when you hear white noise, that could be indicative of a plugin that's maybe in trial version. So sometimes while it's in trial version, the plugin may just send out a burst of white noise so that it's not kind of being used in the projects. Like every 30 seconds, it may just send a, kind of a white noise burst. So make sure that you don't have any projects with maybe a trial version, like any tracks with the trial version plugin. But that's often what could cause white noise like you described. All right, so we see Jazz Dudes just saying, hey, all new viewers, hit the like button. All right, and we have Alexander checking in from Moscow. Okay, so we see a question from Greg McCarty. How can I even the volume between regular playback and using the speaker icon? Okay, so let's say if I'm here and I use kind of the speaker icon. So generally when we utilize this might be going through the control room. So if I adjust the volume down here, we'll see that, this bus often gets sent through the control room when we use the speaker icon. So like while we're playing, and I have my, and this could depend on your routing. So if you go to your audio connections, if you have your outputs kind of set here to not connected, and go to the control room in the audio connections, and where you're going out to your monitoring source, have these set to like your audio interface outputs. So now when we play and I solo, because everything is now going through the control room, so, you know, try adjusting the control room volume, because realize that this is kind of going through two different signal path areas. So if you have compression and stuff like that, you may not, if you have a lot of dynamics processing, it may actually just kind of do the listen, and you could also choose to activate kind of so, you know, depending also on your listen dim, and you could check out the after fader level. So you could try that. So a couple of things to give a try. Okay, so you see, question. I did a tempo detection at measure 43. The music had a pause interpreted as an extra beat. I tried to move the time signature, but couldn't. So at measure 44, it is a beat behind. Any help? All right, so what you could do is, after we do a tempo detection, let's see if it's here. All right. Okay, so I'm going to do a tempo detection. So after a tempo detection is done, it will automatically put you into the, you know, so as we do our tempo detection, so I'll just come over here, it's going to place you into the time warp mode. And why it does this is, as you can check, you know, at this point you could say, okay, you know, measure 43 was off. So at this point, what you could do is, since you're in the tempo detect, what you could do now is, instead of the pause, just adjust measure 43. It kind of places you in the particular tool, you know, right there to make these corrections. So let's say measure 43, instead of starting right here, let's say this pause is going on, should start right here. So I would adjust the tempo right there, and we can see that at this point it would automatically go through and do a reanalysis from that point on. So once it's done a tempo detection, kind of leave the window open and then just move the measure 43 to where it should be, and then it will kind of do its analysis from that point onward and be able to fix it for you. So, you know, just do the move measure 43 exactly where it should be after that tempo detection. And that's why it kind of puts you into that particular tool automatically to make little fine adjustments if needed. All right, so we have Yash checking in from West Sussex in the UK. Okay, so we have a question. How much RAM do I need to create music for the films? Seems like many composers use around 128, or is it okay if I have 96 gigabytes, or should I upgrade to 128? So it really depends on, you know, how many instruments you're running. If you're running instruments that are hosted, you know, externally, a lot of people I know, like, a lot of my composer friends will run 128 gigs of RAM and seem to have no problem. Some people will run 64 gigs of RAM. Some people I know have 384 gigs of RAM, so that, you know, more can be present. So it could really depend on like how many tracks, how large your template is, and, you know, the streaming settings that you have in your particular sample playbacks. But, you know, if you notice that 96s, you're not able to, if you feel it's kind of a workflow hindrance with your current template, then, by all means, you'll never really, if you're a film composer, it'll never be a bad thing to add more memory to your computer system. All right, we have Benny checking in from Stockholm as well. All right, so we have Sergo Casimir just says about Cubase 11 elements, or Cubase Elements 11 initially, then Cubase Pro 11. Can I run them on different computers separately? So it really depends on if you bought the Cubase Pro license separately. So if you bought the Cubase Pro license separately, then you could run them on different computers. If you upgraded your Cubase Elements license to Cubase Pro, that would give you kind of a single license. And at that point, you could, you have one license that you could run on one computer at a time with the USB e-licenser. All right, so we have Nazad checking in from Kurdistan. Thanks for joining the live stream. Okay, so it just says, I have a question. Cubase has an automatic quantize when recording instruments. Does that also include for recording vocals or live instruments? So the quantize is going to be just for MIDI parts. So most people necessarily, wouldn't want to quantize your audio as you're recording. I know it could seem really tempting with some musicians that I've worked with, but it's always best to kind of capture the actual audio recording and then kind of edit it. So it's not really intended to work with audio, but that function is for MIDI information. Okay, we have a question from Scambot Terminator. It says, I'm using Cubase Pro 10.5 and am having trouble with CPU issues. What and how can I lessen the problem? And does Cubase 11 eliminate the problem? So it could really depend on what's causing the CPU, the CPU usage. So, sometimes it could be just one plugin, that could be causing that. If you're running a lot of virtual instruments, depending on the instrument itself, you may want to run more instances of the instrument with fewer instruments loaded. So let's say if you're running 8 Halligan sounds or 8 contact sounds, instead of running one instance of contact and running 8 instances, 8 different sounds within one instance, at that point, that may only utilize one CPU core, whereas if you have 8 instances spread across, with one instrument loaded, that would utilize your CPU cores better. You could also come over here. Let's go to the studio setup. Try selecting your audio interface and raising the buffer size. If you haven't done that already, that's kind of the first thing to do. But, if you let us know if you're using a lot of like effects, like reverbs or lots of instruments, that could give us some more information. So, every Cubase version will have some more CPU optimizations. But it could be, how the plugins are being utilized and the plugins themselves not having the capability of scaling across multiple CPUs, and that could be the problem. Okay, so we just see, please, can I ask, how can I tell what is free and what is paid for content in the Steinberg download manager? Just because you see it in the Steinberg download manager doesn't, don't assume that it's available to use. So, when you actually enter in your digital access code, your download access code, your DAC, you know, once you enter in your download access code, it's going to automatically take you to that particular area that you have. So let's say if I have a Cubase Pro 11 license, just look in the Cubase Pro 11 and then everything that is in this group is free to use. Now, occasionally there will be like an instrument set, like just recently the Novel or Novell piano. I'm not 100% sure on the pronunciation, but if we wanted to come over here, this was a free download. So, but for the most part, assume that whatever you have a license for, just kind of select that product and all the content that is included with that license will be in that group for you to download. So just because you have access to everything doesn't mean that, you know, oh, Nuendo's here, so I must be able to get Nuendo free. That's not how it's going to work. So it's going to be based on whatever you select. We'll show all the license and assume that the other things, for the most part, and there's an exception like the Novel piano, will be, you know, added, additional purchases. And you could, you know, if you're unsure, just kind of check and take a look and see if that particular thing, if it's not in, like if you have Cubase Pro 11, you don't see it there, look it up and see if it costs something. And if you haven't paid for that license, it's not going to show up for you. All right, so we see Conrad on the live stream. We also see Captenergy Music. Thanks for being on. Okay, so just see, hi Greg, thanks for all the work you do for us. I have the following question: why do the plugins not run in sync with the tracks? So, you know, it could really depend. So I'm not sure like which plugin, but a lot of the plugins will have tempo sync capability. So let's say if I wanted to jump back to this project, and I'll just revert it. So, you know, sometimes if something isn't recorded to the click track, you know, then the effects can follow the click track. So you could do a tempo detection like we just showed a couple minutes ago. But let's say if I wanted to add a delay plugin, so I will come over here, let's add an effects track, and I just wanted a delay. So I will come over here, I'm just going to add an effect channel. And let's do a simple mono delay. So generally you'll see like a little thing here for sync. So right now I could have my delay time set to 50 milliseconds. So let's say we're playing along and I go to my sends here. So you can say, okay, here's our delay. And I want to put a delay on my two guitar parts. But if I just adjust the time, we may not see those delays. May not make sense. But if I click on sync, now I could adjust the values here. So let's say, okay, I just want it to be quarter note. So now as we do this, we could just have that delay kind of be synced. So make sure, one, that you have like the audio is synchronized to the project click track. then you could, some plugins will automatically have a sync, and that could, sync your delayed values. So let's say if I wanted to take this, I'll turn this off, and let's say on my master section, I wanted to put a flanger. So I'll come over here, let's get the modulation. So let's say, okay, I have our flanger. So I could have this set to a whole note, and every 4 beats, that would be the speed of the flange. Or if I say, okay, I want this to be half notes, or quarter notes, eighth notes, etc. So make sure that your audio, again, has its own, that the audio is matching a tempo grid. If not, select the tempo, go to your project and do a tempo detection. And then at that point, once you have, if your tempo is fluctuating, at that point you could just choose to add your delay accordingly and have that delay set to sync. And you could do the same with different instruments as well, and arpeggios. So if you could just give us a little more information, that would be helpful. Okay, so we have a question from Tom. Make sure I pronounce that right. Greg, please, can you show us how to sync an external sequencer using MIDI clock? So this would actually be done from the transport menu. So all we have to do is get to the project synchronization setup. So here we could say, okay, I want to send, we could activate external sync right here and go to the destinations, and we'll say MIDI clock, and wherever the sequencer is connected to, MIDI port wise, you could just have that set up, and now that will automatically, just hit play, and it'll send MIDI clock directly out. And also, if you come over here, you could see kind of the synchronization. Let's see if it's active on the transport bar. So we can say activate external sync. And then you could just kind of click directly there and turn that on and off, and you could activate it again from the transport under metronome setup. So you can say, you could just activate the external sync right there. Or I'm sorry, not the metronome setup, but let's go to the project synchronization. So, and you could just turn that on right there. All right, so we have Brian Sawyer checking in from Beulahville in North Carolina. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from the Cube, how do you step input chords in the key editor if you don't have a MIDI keyboard? I mean, besides chord pads. Okay, so let's come over here. And let's go to our, we'll just add an instrument track. Okay, so if you don't have a MIDI controller, one of the cool things is if you hit Alt or Option plus K, you can get a software MIDI controller, so you could use the computer keys. So, and that could be your software controller if you don't have one. So let's say if I wanted to input chords in step mode, I'll activate step input here. Then we'll say, okay, let's put in whole note chords. And we could just have our chords just kind of laid out for us right there. So Alt or Option plus K. And you could use your kind of computer keyboard to actually input chords, and it'll just kind of follow, very similar to kind of a piano keyboard. So give that a try. So to see question, any updates from Yamaha regarding Studio Manager in Cubase 11 Pro? So yeah, I think it still works. So here, if I wanted to go to, I have a Studio Manager, let's say for Yamaha 01V96. So I don't have it actually configured, but it still, it still functions the same way as it did in previous versions, but it's, it will show up under the studio menu to more options. And that's where you could see the different Studio Manager components right there. All right, so we see from Sergo, just says our Steinberg manager is going to create an environment where Cubase users can upload their work for review. So I think that there are some, a lot of times, I don't know if there's, if there's one already on the Steinberg forums or not. So a lot of times, it could get tricky sometimes with copyright issues, posting different things. So a lot of people don't want to necessarily post that, but I know some of the like Facebook groups, I think Cubase users, they allow like, the first Friday of the month or something like that where you could share music. So, it's probably not the highest priority to come up with an area to share content, because there's, companies that are really dedicated to that particular function. So, we're trying to just focus on, providing great tools, but I'll pass it along as kind of user feedback regardless. All right, just lost my spot. Sorry about that. Let me. All right, so we see Real Raven 2000 checking in from Ireland. Thanks for being back on the live stream. It's great to have you on the live stream. Thanks for joining and checking in. All right, and we have Laura Burton saying hello from North Yorkshire. Thanks for being a part of the community. And we see Jeff Sabelski from Chico, California. Okay, so we have a question from Jay from Connecticut. So it says, when opening Groove Agent and its patches, its own patterns come up, is there a way to create and save my own patterns in Groove Agent with the patch, or will it overwrite? So I think, let's just come over here. All right, so say if I have, me just check, reread it one more time. So I think if you come over here, let me just load up a different kit that might have patterns here. Okay, so when we look at our instrument here, so if we go to our pattern, so, you know, you could just come over here and cut the pad. And let's say if I copy this and paste it over here. So let's say, and now when I come over here, I could save the kit as, and we'll just call this all right, and let's see if we can find it easily over here. So if I go right here, we see here's the original kit with patterns. So this will be, we see main 2. And we have main 4 here, but if I just right click, then we could load the kit with patterns. So let's say, okay, this is the one we saved. Say we just added J at the end. So we should see main 2 and main 2. So the same patterns here. So if you've now kind of changed those, you could do that as well and just simply save it as a different, as you know, under a different name if you wanted to. Okay, so we see from Real Raven says after upgrading to 1104, unfortunately some of my tracks crash Cubase. Windows vanishes, no crash log. I can still open them in 10.5. How could I open them raw to export stems from 11? What I would try to do in this kind of, you know, just to come over here and say import in 10.5. You could do this as well, but just say import tracks from project and see if you could now, you know, just, so as soon as we come over here, you could see kind of all the different tracks that are going to be utilized in that project and see, you know, I think that should allow you to, so, and, you know, sometimes even within 11, you could try opening up a few tracks at a time into a new project and see if that makes a difference, or see if you just import all of the tracks. If, you know, if we just do a select all and see if you could do that in 11 as well and see if that will allow you to do it, but just try the import tracks from project function. Okay, so we just see from a question from Sheldon, what's the best way to get a headphone mix for 5 separate members, 4 cues and 1 headphone? Okay, so really all you have to do is, let's say, we just find, so let's say in this group, I wanted to have like 5 headphone mixes. So we could utilize the control room for this. So let's say if we have like drums, bass, guitars, vocals, and we'll say maybe 2 guitars. So let's say I want to come in here. Let's go to my audio connections. I want to go to my control room, and I'm just going to remove my references here, or some of my cues quickly. Okay, so I'm going to right click and, okay, so I want to add a cue. So we'll make this drums. And we have 4 cues. So let's say, okay, this will be bass. Guitars. And we'll add vocals. So. Okay, so now we can see our 4 cue mixes here. So drums, bass, guitars, voices. So what I want to do is go into my full mixer view and make sure in the racks that you have cues actually active. And now what we could do is I'm going to select all of my tracks. All right, so we have all of our tracks selected here. I'm going to right click, and the first thing I wanted to do, and we'll get this little window, we'll see this all cues window. So I'm going to say we're going to activate all of the cue sends. And I wanted to quickly do like a more me headphone mix. So I'm going to start with the mix that we're hearing in a control room, and that could be its own separate cue mix. But I want to use the current mix levels. And this will kind of mimic the faders here across all of the cue sends. And I want to right click and let's use the current pan settings as well. All right, so now that we have that set up, so now when we go between the different cues, we could, have all of the cues set up here. So right now they're all doing the same thing. But now what I want to do is to select, let's say, my drums. And I want to add more of the drums into the drum cue level. So at this point, we're going to activate Quick Link. And I'll say, okay, the drums are louder in the drummer's headphone mix. We're going to slide over to our bass player. He's going to be louder in his headphone mix. And we'll say our guitars are going to be set up to be louder in their headphone mixes. So as soon as we come right over here, so we could adjust those. So I could listen to like my cue mix here. And let's say cue mix 1 is the drummer's headphone mix. So that's what the drummer's hearing more of himself. And you want to go to the bass player's cue mix. Now let's say the bass player is like, oh, I need more kick in my headphone mix. So this way we could send more drum of the bass drum. And let's listen to the guitar's cue mix. So at this point we're going to send more guitar. So we could have the vocalist be on their own kind of cue mix. So as we say, okay, let's listen to our bass player's mix, our drummer's mix, and the drummer's like, okay, I want to hear more bass to get the rhythm section love. So say, let's send more bass to the drummer's mix. And this is the mix that's going out of the headphones, plus drummer's mix, bass players, guitars, and you can do the same thing for the vocalist. So that's how you could set up kind of 4+1 headphone mixes directly here. And then once you have that all set up, the beauty of it is it's saved directly within the project as well. Okay, so all right, so we have Thermonuclear War from Serbia joining. Thanks for being a part of the live stream. All right, so we see, just going back to an earlier question, Thanks for the answer and the gain tool plugin question. I used that pre-gain in the mixer, minus 18 dB, but after some effects, it's almost at 0 dB. So I mean a gain volume plugin tool for insert tracks. So a lot of times you could even just come up to, let's say if we just go to, if you want to do it as an insert, you could just, do a compressor without any settings, and you could have makeup gain here of 24 dB without any dynamics being applied to it. So if you have to run it as an insert, you could use like a compressor, or, there's other tools. If you wanted to use an EQ, you could go to, the frequency EQ, and you could have output here without instantiating the plugin. So you could, add gain stages with, EQ plugins or compressor plugins without compressing as well. So if you need to do it at the insert level. Okay, so we see a question. It says, while pitch correcting an audio in Very Audio, it does not allow to split a note by hovering cursor over the note to get an X tool, but it does not. It does allow. It does allow to split a note by hovering the cursor over the note to get an X tool, but it does not allow to split the note at its very beginning and end. All right, so let's just take a look. So if you need to split a note at the beginning or end, so let's say if I come here and go to Very Audio, all right, so, let's say if we go to kind of our smart control, let's say, if I'll just make this a little larger. All right, and I'm going to switch over to show all smart controls. All right, so as we hover, as you notice that we can see, we could split. All right, so let's say if we wanted to split, I think if we hold down, all right, so when we go to the bottom, we could do our shift. All right, so it looks like we could do it to there. So I thought that was all the way through, but let me just see if it's the same on every note. We kind of hover here. All right, so I thought that holding down one of the modifier keys would automatically split. It looks like it's only like as soon as it gets to there, it's going to glue. Let me see if there's. Yes, I thought it would split all the way through, but it doesn't look like it's doing it. So it might be just depending on how it's kind of segmented, but let me just. Yes, I don't know of a way off the top of my head. I'm trying some different variations, but if you want to email me, I could play around with it some more and do some reading up on it. But sorry about that. It's not how I thought it worked. So, but if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'll do some more research on it. All right, so we see Tiago checking in from Brazil. Thanks for joining. All right, so we see how do you use the step filter plugin in Cubase? So let me just do a new project here. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you learned something new, make sure that you do hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. And that enables us to continue to do these live streams. Let's do a new project here real quick. Okay, so let me see if it's... Okay, I haven't worked with this particular plugin in a long time, but let's see if we can get it figured out. If it's... Okay, so I think what this is going to allow us to do is, let's say if I... All right, let me just get a little kind of sequence thing going on here. So this is our patch here without the step filter. So if I wanted to... So this would allow us to kind of have different filter sweeps that are just going to be kind of... so let's say, okay, we'll just... So this will allow us to have kind of different filters that will be tempo synced. So that will allow you to kind of just have different filter types. So you could adjust the cutoff and resonance kind of on a musical grid. And that's what that's going to allow you to do. Okay, so we just see from Real Raven 2000, I want to upload the multi-tracks drive for my fellow member at the Produce Like a Pro Academy for remixing. Would prefer 11 because it's awesome, but it crashes. Might be Waves 13 fault. So, you know, you could definitely, you know, try saving, you know, maybe just try saving a particular version of that particular of the particular project without Waves plugins and kind of see if you can narrow it down. But, you know, often stuff like that will be kind of third party related. All right, and we have Sable Winters is on the live stream. Thanks for joining. It says, greetings, Greg and Cubase family. It's exciting to see new faces here today. That's a great point. So welcome to so many new people that are on the live stream. Okay, so we have from Tiago a feature request, free warp in multiple events. So I know we've passed that feature request on to the development and product planning team. So we'll see what happens in the future, but it'll be passed on once again. So thanks for passing on the feedback. Okay, so we see a question. How do I duplicate MIDI notes relative to the ones I copied? Control D just duplicates. Okay, so let's say at this point, if I have a MIDI note range, so let's say just create a one measure part. And within this one measure part, I wanted to have a number of all right, so let's say this one part doesn't include, you know, it has rests at the beginning and at the end. So if I come over here and duplicate events, I could, so if we just hit Control or Command D, that would duplicate, but it doesn't take into account the rest at the beginning or the end. So we're just duplicating the particular events. So we could go to what's called the in-place editor, and we can do that by hitting Control or Command plus Shift plus the letter I. And then, you know, we could also have this as an icon here, so that you could load up for the edit in place. Now, once we're in the in-place editor, I could grab the just the range tool. So I'm going to grab the range tool here, and I'm going to select the range, and then I could duplicate the range, and that would automatically duplicate the events out as well. So once I kind of elongate this part, we could see that all of those events would be duplicated. So you could duplicate not only the MIDI notes, but the range of the events from before or after. So do it within the in-place editor. I know it's kind of a workaround, but that will get the trick done for you. Okay, so we have, just says, I do have one more question. What's the best way to audition an effect solo? So let's say, since Sable's on the live stream, we'll go back to a song she's going to make famous soon, the Beatles and Stones. So let's say if we're, we want to only hear the particular effect. So let's say if I'm listening to this track and I want to only hear the reverb, but not the other source. So when I go to like my effects return channel here, that this will solo the source that's feeding it, such as the and the effect itself. Now, if we only wanted to hear the effect itself soloed, all we have to do is click here. Instead of hitting S, we can click on the L. So now we're only hearing the effect soloed. So when we click on solo of the effects channel, we hear the sources that are feeding it as well.
when I played Hey Jude.
But now when I come here, I can just click on L. So, and we could just take that dim level down. So now I'm only hearing the effect. So here I'm hearing the effect blended with the source. When I solo, when you click on L, you only hear the effect isolated. So give that a try, Robbie. Okay, so we have a question from Sergo. What are the advantages between the Halion 6 and the standard Halion that comes with the 11 Pro box? So, you know, we could think of the Halion Sonic SE as kind of more of the playback engine. When we work with the full version of Halion, I'll just go ahead and load up an instance of Halion, you know. So if you wanted to play back sound, so Halion will give you additional sound feature sets. So it's going to have, you know, more content. So it's going to have, you know, like different types of, you know, wavetable synthesis. So if you wanted to, you know, just come here and kind of circulate through, you know, waveforms, we could do that. But the most important thing is that, you know, with Halion is really set up to create your own instrument. So if you wanted to sample directly into Halion, you could do that very easily. And you could, you know, basically create your own VST instruments directly from here. So if you wanted to, you know, if I had to give a difference in one sentence, it might be, you know, with, you know, if you just want to play back, you know, sounds that other people have done and tweak it, you could use Halion Sonic and Halion Sonic SE. But if you really wanted to create your own sounds, that's when, you know, working with Halion 6 can, you know, make a world of difference, you know. So even, you know, we have lots of people now that, you know, are creating their own instruments, you know, Chris St. Aubin, you know, who's one of the moderators on the Cubase users group. He does, you know, he's created his own instrument, simple, that you could run in Halion. So we can think of Halion as an instrument design environment as well. You know, Danny Lux created his company Sample Fuel, and Danny's, you know, a incredibly popular TV composer. Has done Grey's Anatomy for 18 or 19 years now, I believe. But, you know, he sells his own instruments through Sample Fuel. So if you wanted to create your own instruments, you could just come over here, and that's what Halion could do. So it's going to be more involved, but, you know, if you want to just kind of play back great sounds, Halion Sonic is perfect for that. If you wanted to create and really do sound design, Halion is a perfect tool for that. All right, so we see Taylor checking in from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining the live stream. All right, so we see from Mark Batson just saying, hi, Greg, thanks for the info. So you're welcome. Okay, so we see from Jay, does Nuendo / Cubase have a Leslie style spinning speaker plugin? All right, so I think there's a rotary plugin. So let's say if I just wanted to come here, let's say if we have, so let's say if we come over here to the inserts, I think that we could just, yeah, under modulation, look for a rotary plugin. So now at this point, if you want to add distortion as well. And so there's another question: are there convolution reverbs with short and long space to place within Leslie? Within spatial differences. So generally the convolution reverb, you could have, one convolution loaded, but you could run multiple convolution reverb. So if you wanted one to be kind of a short and one to be a big room. So you could definitely just run two instances. All right, so we see a question. Is it necessary to dither from 32-bit floating point to 24-bit? So it's often ideal, but it could really, but you may not notice it unless you're, the playback system that you're working with can actually play back, 32-bit files, but so a lot of, if you're using kind of like a media player, may not be able to load up a 32-bit file. So. Okay, we have a question. Is there a way to change the scaling in Supervision spectrum curve? Let's take a look. I'll just do a new instance here. So usually there's kind of like a setup, but I think really kind of the concept is to kind of show all of the frequencies that are. And let me just check to make sure I'm understanding the question right. Yeah, so I don't think that there's, so we could adjust kind of, so I think the scaling might be fixed, but. So I think that particular scaling that we see here is kind of fixed on kind of normal industry standards. Okay, it's. Okay, so we see in the Supervision spectrum curve settings, what does the multi mean and what do the other settings do? And I click on multi mean. Let's take a look since we have this up. Jump back to the beginning of the project. So let me just see if I can make sure I'm in the right area. So spectrum curve, and we see okay, so it's this area here. So let's say when we go to our Fft views, if we wanted to see like fewer points, so we can see like 256 points versus we can see more increased resolution as we do this. So this, if you have kind of a slower computer, this kind of gives you like, 20 2048 points of reference, or so if I wanted to quadruple that, you can see kind of the frequency range that we're looking here that's kind of being represented is what we see. So the higher the resolution, the more information that it's actually kind of indicating to us, the frequencies. So that's what it's kind of showing you. So if we go to 256, we'll see it get more kind of coarse with its resolution. It's only looking at 256 points versus 16,384. So that's what it is. It's kind of how many frequency points that it's looking at. So. Okay, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, says, hi Greg, I've got 3 mics and guitar and 3 tracks recording, 5 recorded lanes on all 3 and comp edits on 1. Needs to be transferred to other 2 tracks, how to copy the comp edits and apply to other tracks. So let's go ahead and I'll just set up a quick project to do this really quick. Okay, so we have 3 tracks. Let's say 5 recorded lanes. Okay, so all right, so I'll just do a couple of passes here. Okay, so let's say we'll now come over here and we could look at the lanes of all the tracks. I'll just make these all a little smaller. Okay, so okay, so you said it did comp edits. So let's just come over here and we'll grab our comp tool. All right, and it needs to be transferred to 2 other tracks, how to copy the comp edits and copy and apply to 2 other tracks. So let's come over here. Let's add 2 tracks. Okay, so if I wanted to take, let's just take a lane here, and let me just, one trick that you could do is, let's say if I take just these 2, let's say I have these particular ones that are set up, so I'm gonna hold down Control and click. You could right click and choose create tracks from lanes. And now at that point, you could just copy those particular new tracks to lanes if you wanted to. So that may be kind of a good approach. Sometimes with multi-tracks, working with track versions is also a good approach as well. Okay, so we see from Real Raven 2000, I just realized I can run Cubase by disabling third-party plugins. I'm able to open the project there. Then I should be able to print stems. So yeah, you should be able to. So that way, you know, it's kind of a third-party plugin that's causing the issue. All right, so we see the cube is liking away from Melbourne, Florida. So thanks for joining us on the live stream. Okay, so we just see, so from another question from Jay. So sorry, it should be my final question today. So you could ask as many questions as you want. If there weren't questions, there wouldn't be live streams. So please don't ever hesitate to ask questions. So the question is there a simple way workflow to shift stereo channels to mono for phasing and frequency masking checks prior to mix? So, you know, if you did have a stereo, you know, so let's say if you just wanted to, you know, often looking at meters will give you kind of a good indication. So, but let's say if we're here and I just want to take like the guitar parts, let's say I want to take a stereo guitar here, I'll activate this project. You know, if you just kind of, let's say, okay, this is a stereo track, but it's panned, you know, and this is what's great about Supervision is you could just kind of come over here and just check out the phase. So if you say, okay, let's just go to kind of like, you know, different phase scopes, you could look there. But if you wanted to just split, you know, another thing that you could do is just come over here, go to the project, and you'll see, I think it's under project, and you'll see convert tracks, and we could say multi-channel to mono. And then you could have like the two tracks here and be able to, and at this point, if you select one, we could just also just kind of even flip the phase and hear if that's better or not, just directly from the info line right up here. So that's an easy way to kind of, you know, just check for phase anomalies in a particular track as well. Okay, so we see a question. How do you use the logical editor to go about quantizing MIDI lengths to end and beginning? So it's not necessarily a logical editor preset, but let's just kind of jump back. I think I might have something. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to take this, all right, and I just wanted to, let's take my snap off. So let's say I will randomly, I'm just going to create a condition in the logical editor here. So let's say I want to take notes and I want to take position and set random values. Let's say all right, so these are all kind of slightly off time. So let's say they start at 15, it starts at 10, and then I wanted to adjust length. And let's set the random values between -30 and 30 for length. All right, so say I'll just have this, and I'm just gonna go in here and randomly adjust length. So let's say, this is quarter notes. I wanted all these to be quarter notes in length and start at quarter notes. But when we look at them, okay, so let's say I want these all to be quantized. So I'm just going to set up like my quantize value here to quarter notes. And then we could set up just a macros, and I'll just go to my key commands. And I could say, we'll do new, we'll say quantize, start and end. All right, so just find the So I'm going to just say quantize. So let's say I want it to be set to quarter notes. All right, so we'll say fourth. So I'm going to add that. Let's quantize the event, add, and let's quantize the event ends or lengths to quarter notes. So we'll just now come right over here and add that. So we're going to say quantize start and end, and we'll just rename this to quarter. Okay, so now all these notes that are slightly off, we'll just come over here to our macro, and if I did everything right, quantize start and end to 1/4. So I will just select everything here. And then everything will be the same length and start. And so you could do it just kind of like that with a macro. So once again, to do that, and you could choose to do it for quarter notes, eighth notes, whatever you want. So we'll just say, quantize start and end to quarter notes. So we can set the quantize value, set it to quantize and quantize MIDI lengths. So generally, like, the logical editor will allow you to select and manipulate stuff, but it doesn't quantize from within the logical editor. I think the original Atari version would allow you to do it. And I also see just other comments, like if you wanted to monitor a source in mono, how to do it, So let's say if we are in a particular project here and we wanted to monitor in mono, this could be done from inside of the control room. So let's say So if I go to the down mix presets, we can go to stereo and listen to it in mono or stereo right there. So if you're looking for, just for checking phase anomalies, you could do that directly in the control room. Okay, so we see Greg's question. I added 8 mono tracks at once in Nuendo, and I can't use pan on them. and as empty pan window. If I add one mono audio track at a time, the pan works fine. What am I missing? Thanks. All right, so we'll do a new project. All right, so I'm going to add one mono track, and I'm just going to check the audio outputs that it's going to be set to stereo. So I do that. We look at our mix console, and I have my panning. So let's say if I go to add mono tracks, so make sure that the the configuration here like isn't set to like a mono output. So if I do that, then I don't have mono capabilities. But just make sure that when you go to add the audio track, that the audio outputs are set to stereo. Because if not, then you won't get panning because it's being routed to a mono output. So that would be the first thing I would check, Jeff. All right. Okay, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. In Pro 11, is there a way to use Q-Link to adjust the faders in a project, including those with automation? So if you wanted to, let's just come over here. I'm just going to draw in some automation on a couple tracks. All right, so let's say if I select a number of these channels, and activate the Q-Link, we could adjust, but you realize that the Q-Link value, we could adjust all of those down, but realize that, if the track is tied to automation, that you could just simply it will go back to its particular value. But if you just want to, write new automation, that will maintain kind of the new position. But realize that as you adjust these tracks, if there is automation, it will jump. So, but you could adjust there, or if you're in kind of the larger mix console, some people will go to the pre section and then just be able to adjust, or if you have, adjust down, or if you wanted to just select all of the automation points. Another method of doing this, is to, if we have all of these tracks sent to a VCA, so I could now come right over here, and we could add a VCA to the selected channels. So now that as I could now just adjust the VCA, and that will allow you to maintain the automation. So while I adjust the VCA down, you can still see the automation going. So if you have existing automation, it may make more sense to utilize a VCA fader. And then your VCA will accommodate existing tracks automation. That's kind of one of the big intents and purposes in that, Lewis. All right, so we see Ted Springman got to go to Dweezil's new room, so in LA. So yeah, I've passed on kind of a technical contact in LA since we're kind of still under travel restrictions, but I'll make sure that he reaches out to Dweezil. I saw some of the pictures of it. Looks great. I know he's been kind of planning it for years and years, maybe like 10 years. So I'm glad you got to see it, Ted. Dweezil's a wonderful guy. All right, wonderful to see JVI on the live stream. Okay, so we see Carmen just saying hi from Australia. So thanks for joining the live stream. Realize it's really late there. It's one of my favorite countries I've ever visited. It just says I have a problem with the download assistant not working. So, if you wanted to, depending on your product, you could probably download it directly from the Steinberg website. So let's say if I come right over here, we could say like Cubase Pro 11 download. So we'll go to Cubase 11 download Steinberg. So just first thing comes up in Google. And then once you're here, so you could download it without the Steinberg download assistant. So a lot of it you could just download directly here from a web interface if the download assistant isn't working for you. So give that a try. So again, I just Googled Cubase Pro 11 download, and then just go to the Steinberg site, and then you should be all set. Thanks for staying up very late or very early in Australia to join us. All right, wonderful that Michael Teams could make the live stream. I think everyone will now be getting virtual ice cream. All right, so we see a question. Is there a way to remove the ownership lock on projects shared via VST Transit? I know I can duplicate the tracks and edit them, but we have duplicates of everything. It's starting to annoy my CPU. So I think probably what a lot of people might do, is just to, I haven't run into that. I don't have it kind of configured on my new system, but you might be able, if you're seeing duplicate tracks, is just kind of come over here and just choose to disable the duplicate tracks. Just right click when they're selected. So give that a try, and that should free up its CPU usage, and then you could hide those particular tracks as well. See Jeff Sabelski saying he's like number 69 today, so that's great. All right, we have Jason Stykes joining the live stream. Okay, so we just see, hi Greg, if I put a channel strip, this question, if I put a channel strip on all my tracks and I go from track 1 to track 4, the plugins I see does not change. Okay, so let's say if I'm here, let me just enable these tracks on this project. Okay, so let's say if I look at my channel strip here, okay, so let's say I have this channel strip, and now when I come here, and this could be contingent on so when I go to channel 1, I have these settings. When I go to channel 4, it goes to those settings. But let's go ahead and just take a look, because this could be contingent on a preference. Maybe the select channel track on edit settings. So let's see if we turn that off and I hit apply. That still seems to work. Let me just... And maybe it's this one, sync selection in project window and mix console. Yeah. So check this preference here. So go to editing, project and mix console, and make sure that sync selection in project window and mix console is checked. And then that should, whatever you have selected, you should see the open channel kind of automatically reflect and select there. Okay, so we just see a question. What about the envelope shaper? So if you haven't really kind of played around with the envelope shaper, this is kind of a gem for plugins. But let's say if I wanted to jump back over to this project. So I like to think of this as kind of like the magic compressor that people often kind of seek out. So I'm going to create just a quick, like a drum bus here for all my drum takes. And let me revert this project so it doesn't sound ridiculous. So, you know, we could think of this as kind of like a transient designer type of deal, but I want to take all of my drums and route it to a group, and I'll just put a envelope shaper on a group, and this is part of the channel strip as well. So add a group channel to the selected, and we're going to make this a stereo group. So now I'll just raise the volume up here so we can hear it a little better. All right, so I just want to take the drums, and I'll just do it as a plug-in here under Dynamics. So if I wanted more attack on the drums, and I wanted them to last longer, so if we just, or if I want my drums to be like Steely Dan, or I just want like the transients to kind of sneak through, like more disco, but if I want like to adjust the length and the release to make them sound like bigger, or even if you wanted to adjust the attack down. Interesting sound design work you could do there. It's kind of an extreme example, but give you an idea what you could do with the envelope shaper. So, and you could get more gain out of it as well. So think of it as a magic compressor, and I consider it the anti-suck drum, the anti-drum suck plugin. So, all right, wonderful to see Glenn from Suffolk, Virginia. Glad you could join us, a fellow Virginian. You see Cedric is getting Michael Team's ice cream. All right, my chat just moved. I may have lost a couple of questions, so I apologize. All right. So we see so question. I think I may have missed a couple minutes of questions. I apologize for that. It's lots of questions today. So it says I only write, record rock and roll. Cubase should handle guitar, bass, drums, keys, vocals pretty easily. Am I correct? Thanks. Yeah. So you shouldn't have any problems even with a very modest computer these days to do that. Okay, with another question. Hi, Greg's greetings from Colombia again. When is Cubase 11.5 a reality? So we'll just have, nothing has been announced yet. So we'll just have to wait for some announcements and find out. Okay, so we just see from PZone36, it says, question, we need to be able to search by date created for presets, kits, etc. So let's go ahead and take a quick look in Media Bay. Let's see if, like, I go to user content, and let's go to track presets or sampler. So we did this one today, and let's see if there is. So if you really wanted to do that, we could probably just come and let's see if there's a date created function. Okay, or you could just do date created here. All right, and let's see if we go to the setup here. So you can see that you can search. You may have to just come over here. So we can see 11.9.21. That's the sampler track preset that we did today. So just click here in the Media Bay and go to Media and just make sure that you check date created. And then once you have that, you can, place it right here if you wanted to be able to search by that. So you could see that metadata right there. So give that a try. Okay, so we just see from Jeff Sabelski just asking, with loads of ESTIs and effects going on, I've noticed that hovering a cursor near the volume slider on a track, the audio breaks up a little, but like it thinks I'm editing. New Windows, an audio issue. Sometimes that might be related to, it could be related to a graphics card driver. So I'm not sure if you did go up to Windows 11, but check your graphics driver and make sure you had the latest, or maybe that's where I would kind of look first for something like that. So. All right, so we see from Pete Franco, can we audio warp multiple tracks in a folder, or do we need to cut and move them? So currently the audio warp, we could do it for like, drum quantizing, but we can't really, it's really intended for drum quantizing. And I know that, the development team is aware that people want to be able to, warp on the main project window. So. All right, so we just see a question. Excuse me. Been trying to find out what Cubase was for a minute now. Happy it's in my recommendation. So it's just a wonderful tool for composing and recording music. And think of it as like probably the most comprehensive program for enabling you to do that. All right, so Michael Teams has granted me 4 scoops of Scoopy's Black Diamond Ice Cream. That's good. I liked that flavor last week too. So thank you, Michael. It's very generous. Okay, so we just see, hi, how can I remap MIDI notes from Digital Drum Kit, Logical Editor? Thanks. So a lot of times, depending on the source, it's usually up to the instrument. If it was going to be utilizing Groove Agent, you could click on this little icon right here. And now, like as you click on particular, a particular pad, you could just say Edit Learn Trigger Note. And now as you would just play it, it would automatically just set the triggered note accordingly there. So you could just, but you don't really see that option to right click to assign the trigger note until you're in this mode here. So make sure that's active. Now, if you have an existing kit, you may want to first just try an E-drum controller, which, may be a Roland compatible, my guess, or a Yamaha DTX, so that there may be presets already done for popular mappings. But once this is enabled, you could right click and just edit learn MIDI notes. So once you have that turned on, just hit a MIDI note and it will just trigger that particular, and that note will be assigned to that pad. All right, so we see Fred Robinson on the live stream. Thanks for joining. All right, so Tim Weinheimer saying we need more people to punch the like button. All right, so we see a question. Hello, Greg. Can I extract chords from Wav files? So currently the chord extraction is only from MIDI information and not from Wav files. Okay, so we just see, hi, question, maybe for our live stream, but how to sync some kind of video to score? Thanks. This is from question from Brazil. All right, so let's go take a look at it. So as soon as you have, if it's going to be a video that's going to reside in Cubase, which is probably the most common way, it used to be where we'd have video decks that would have SMPTE time code built in. Let me just open up a project to show this. All right, so, you can import a video track, so you can add a video track. So once we have the video track added, we can, just do that, and we could import video. So we can have the video track here, and you can hit the F8 button, and that will open up kind of like the video display. So as we kind of play, you can just kind of come right over here. We could, update the video. And one of the cool things is, you could just go to the transport, and there's this little mode called use video follows edit mode. And now what I'm going to be able to do is, as I move a MIDI event here, we could move, as we move an event like a MIDI note or audio, we could just see that the video will update frame by frame as we work with that. So there's all sorts of great video capabilities, and why Cubase is probably the most popular tool for scoring to picture for, film and TV. All right. And we have Malin joining us. So thanks for joining the live stream. Okay, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, if I group the background vocals, then add a new take, how do I add or remove an audio track from the group? Okay, so let's say if I have all of my drums now going to this particular group. So when we look at our channels here, and we look at our outputs, we'll see that these are all being routed to group 1. So, and that's just when I selected all these and I added a particular, I went to add track, and then I added a group channel to selected tracks. But if I wanted to add another audio track, this will now default to the stereo out, but I can now just send this directly to the group, or take these, instead of sending it to the group in the outputs, send that to the stereo out here. So that's how we could reassign, tracks to an existing group, or take tracks that are routed to an existing group and route it elsewhere, just in the bottom here. Okay, so we just see, hey, Greg, is there a way to map various parts of Beat Agent kit to different outputs like we can with an acoustic agent? All right, so this is a Beat Agent kit here. So let's say, I'll just... Okay, so I'm here. All All right, so if I wanted to, these are all going out of one stereo output here. So we can see on channel 17 here. So let me just move this out of the way. So if I wanted to, so as soon as you select the pad, you can see right here, you want to be on the instrument tab, go to edit to main, and you'll see kit mix. And then you could just route these to, so if I wanted this to be output 3, I'll just kind of scroll the mixer over here. So now my snare is out of its own output, the kick is out of its own output, and that could be not going to the kit mix, but now to. So if we just look as I hit the kick, we'll see that channel light up, snare, different channel, the China crash, and other sources that haven't been assigned. So again, just select a pad, instrument to edit to main, and then you'll see the outputs there. So you can assign it to 32 stereo outs. So we just see a question. Hi, is mastering possible with Cubase, or should people buy Wavelab for it? You know, it really depends on, you know, people's definition of mastering could be much different. So, you know, while Cubase can take a, you know, stereo audio file and process it and run it through different plugins, you know, like most DAWs can do that. You know, Wavelab is really kind of a dedicated mastering tool, which has kind of a different perspective and different workflows that are very unique to mastering. So, I mean, you could have built-in reference tracks. You can do stem mastering if you need it, you know, additional metering options, CD burning, additional metadata. So, you know, if you just want it to process audio files and run it through, you know, some, you know, plugins, you could do that in Cubase. But if you're, you know, like a professional mastering engineer, you know, that needs to deliver, you know, multiple formats, multiple metadata for different, you know, delivery systems. And, you know, you need to listen to the different encoders as you're making the mastering decisions. Wavelab is a better tool for that. All right, so we see Mandy Lanes on the live stream. Thanks for joining. Okay, so let me just, so I just see a question here. How do you solo a track within a group without having the whole song come back in when I unsolo that individual track? Example, working within the drum folders and wanting to solo one and unsolo it. All right, so let's say we have all of our drums in a group here. Okay, so let's say, okay, so I'm going to assign a grouped channel to the selected channels here. So, all right. Okay, so it says, how do you solo track within a group without having the whole song come back in when I unsolo the individual track? So in working within the drums folder and wanting to solo one and then unsolo it. So let's say, you know, we're playing along here and I solo the kick drum here. Okay, so it says, so working within the drums folder and wanting to solo one and unsolo it. So if I'm here, I could just, you know, when you solo and unsolo, we could do that. If you wanted to, I think if you hold down, you know, if you want to hold down Control or Command, you know, you could solo one track and then that would, you know, place only that track in solo. So if I go to the bass and now let's say I want to come to the kick. So holding down Control can just allow you to solo only the event without having to unsolo everything else. And let's say if we have just a group soloed, you know, I could come here and if we wanted to unsolo, you know, we could, and unsoloing will mute, but try if you want to do kind of like an absolute solo, try holding down, you know, Control or Command and then click on the solo and then everything else will get muted. So let me know if that will help. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to link or group audio events so that when I warp, cut, or edit one track, any linked tracks follow? I'd like to correct timing of recording and use multiple mics. So currently, you know, if we are, you know, if I have these like in a folder, I could come over here and just kind of cut, you know, all within, you know, I could cut different elements within the folder if you wanted to. So, you know, and even if I have like this part selected in the folder and I go to, let's say, the range tool. So let's say I hit the letter P, I select that event. I could just come right over here and choose to, you know, delete time. So if you want to do that, but it's not going to do warping, but, you know, other edits you could apply globally if it's in within a folder just to, or, you know, if we just wanted to select multiple events together and group these. So if I hit Command or Control G, then when I cut one, you know, all of the events will be kind of treated and edited together like that. But it doesn't apply for warping at this point. But for other edits, it will. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so I just see from C notes, it says in the piano roll, legato and delete overlapping notes hasn't worked since 11 came out, and I have to use other DAWs for MIDI because of it. Will there be an update to fix this soon? So let me just check it out again. I know I've kind of passed it on in the past, and we'll do it again if it needs it, but we'll just take a quick look just to make sure. Or I'll just drag from chord pads here. So it looks like that is an 11.04.1. The legato seems to be kind of functioning. So let me know if you've tried 11.04.1 and if that is helping. I know in previous versions that was behaving differently. Okay, so we see question, what is the purpose of Cubase Pro 11 plugins in the network tab? VST Connect QMix, VST Connect Monitor, VST Connect SE. So what those allow you to do is when we go to the VST Cloud is you could actually, once you go to create a VST Connect, at this point, I don't have kind of Q channel set up. So, but those plugins are used when we do the remote recording of other people. So when we go to, just create a VST Connect SE, and I kind of changed my setup. So let me just repair the setup. So at this point we could record people remotely, and those are plugins that allow the audio to be routed through the control room so that the person could hear the project that they're recording directly into. So those are what those particular plugins are for. Very great to see Randy Lee in the live stream. Okay, reading through more comments. Excuse me. All right, so it's just seeing some discussion about Iconica, and Steinberg did do that in conjunction with orchestral tools, and there's some speculation if Iconica is an excerpt from some of the other orchestral tools libraries. So it's actually a completely different sampling session that's unique to Iconica. So. All right. So we see from Jay, it says, would you be so kind as to feature request MIDI key editor, add same snap quantize choices drums do, so virtual instruments have more movement options. So if you're in the editor here, we could just use kind of the, for the grid. So I think like, if we just kind of come over here, so let's say if we set kind of our grid, it's going to be based on the quantize value. So let's say, if I just come here, and, so right now we have our quantize set to quarter notes, but let's say, if you change the quantize value to 16th notes, which you could do, it's, you should be able to just kind of, so I'm not sure if, once you change the quantize value, that at that point, the grid can automatically just follow the quantize, as we move different elements. So say, okay, I want this to be, quarter note triplets as I move this, and I want it to be, and you could set up keyboard shortcuts for all of the different values. I want eighth notes for this as I move it. So let me know if that kind of works for you, Jay. You know, just being able to kind of, you know, while it's not independent, you could just kind of switch it and then move the notes based on the particular grid that you want and change it. Okay, so I have a question from Alice, just saying, how do I set up the sampler so it doesn't react like tape and only focuses on pitch change without slowing down or speeding up the original sample? So we could activate audio warp. So let me just show you how to do that. All right, so if I wanted to, let's say if I just come here to like this vocal file.
No time to hesitate, it's all been done.
And let's say if I play it at a lower, like one octave lower. So, but normally when you do this, you know, like it'll be.
No time to hesitate, it's all been.
If I play an octave higher, it'll play twice as fast. Or an octave lower, half as fast. So if you wanted the same speed regardless of what pitch, just turn on audio warp.
No time to hesitate, it's all been. No time to hesitate. No time to.
And then regardless of what pitch you play, it'll play back.
No time to have. No time to.
It'll play back at the same speed. So that's all you have to do. So just make sure that you enable audio warp as opposed to normal here, and then the samples will play back at the original speed. Okay, so we see, is it possible to convert CC to note on values? For example, recording velocity using a fader, perhaps in a recording situation, using the CC fader to record velocities or use logical editor. Okay, so let's say if I, okay, so let's see if we could do this. We might be able to do this in the input transformer, but let's take a look. All right, so I'm just gonna make a bunch of notes here. Okay. So let's take a look at our I just want to check, make sure what message this fader is sending out. So I'm just going to put on my MIDI monitor here. Okay, so let's say I grab 32. So let's see if we go to our input transformer. So I want to take our target. We'll say our type is equal to let's say type is going to be equal to MIDI controller change, MIDI controller. And value 1 is going to be equal to 32 because that's what I'm spitting out. Okay, and I want this to be set for value 2. So let's say, sorry about that. It's annoying. All right. Okay, so I'm not sure if, let me just go to my Midi inserts here quickly. All right, so let's see if we can do it through a logical editor. And I think there's a preset that's similar to this. Okay, and it's gonna. All right, so when we, it's not going to necessarily convert to CC to note on values, but we can take like our notes. So let's say if we wanted to Okay, so I'll just see if we could backward engineer this quickly. If not, I could take it offline. All right, so we want to say type is equal. Let's say to controller, and let's say it's going to be controller 1. I may have to take this a little bit offline if you want to email me, and I could see if I could get to, play around with it a little more for next time, because generally, the velocity is tied to the note message. So it's not like, like remapping a controller to a different controller. I think I can make it happen, but I may have to spend probably a little more time than people want to watch me have brain cramps on. So, but I'll see if I'll make a note to see if we can do that for Friday's live stream. Okay, reading through more comments here. So I see, hey Greg, I use audio movers when working with customers remotely. Is it possible that I run the plugin through a queue so I have a separate volume for the customer. So I imagine that you could. So if you just come over here, if you wanted to run the plugin through a QMix, what you could do is just come over here to the control room. And I think I may have it installed for a quick remote thing I was doing for someone. But if we wanted to go to inserts and then we could go to the queue, we can then just kind of add, I think it shows up here as listen to, that you might be able to just run the, run it directly there as an insert on the main. I don't work with it much. I just kind of used it once and still have it on my system. But, try just selecting the queue mix that you want it on, and then click on inserts, and then you could have 8 inserts per queue as well. See, Sable Winters is saying hit the like button if you haven't already. All right, so I just see, I'm not sure if it's a question or just comment. It says innuendo exporting file blue screen and computer restart. So I would check to see if you're doing that. So usually blue screens are kind of indicative of something hardware related. So, generally most of the time I think blue screens are going to be hardware related. Try, when you do the export audio mix down, out of curiosity, see if it makes a difference if you have the effects on, if you don't have effects, and if you bypass third-party plugins. And also, just out of curiosity, try saving it to a different location, like a different drive or a different path, and see if that makes a difference. Okay, my timeline jumped on me. Okay, so I don't think I lost any questions this time. All right. All right, so we're seeing Graham, which you're saying never used an envelope shaper before. You must really try that out. So yeah. All right, so I just see from Vince Music, so sync video maybe in another streaming. So if you're syncing video, really all you have, if you're like syncing to a video deck or if you're syncing to a video file, but if you're syncing to a video deck, you need to take, whatever time code is coming in, and you need to come directly over to, first thing is to make sure that you have when you go to your audio interface, that it's going to be externally clocked. You're going to need an audio, like a sync box that not only has like SMPTE time code or an LTC input and will spit out, time code, via MIDI time code as well as clock. And we would need to tell your audio interface to synchronize to the clock. And you need to tell Cubase to, once you go to the transport, to go to the project synchronization setup. And you need to say, okay, our MIDI time code source, you would say, I just wanted to come right here, is coming directly from this particular input port. And that's all you'd have to do to sync up to external video. But if you could just let us know if you wanted to do video in the box, which we showed a little earlier. I know there's a long delay by the time the questions are asked. But, if you need to sync to like a video deck, but, Cubase could do both. So just see something like Army DigiCheck for Steinberg interfaces available in the future. So I haven't run an Army interface in 20 years. So if you could let me know what functions in DigiCheck that you want, then we may be able to kind of do something equivalent, but just let me know. All right, so we have a question. Does Logic Pro Audio Engine offer any advantage over Cubase Pro, or they sound the same? So, many people have told us that, I think by the time you get into, theoretically, they should all be the same, but there's, could be a lot of different variations in what's going in. So I'm not sure if they're doing 64-bit floating point, but many people have come from Logic because they like the sound of the Steinberg engine better. So we hear that pretty consistently. So, all right. So we see from John Pinion, what additional features, improvements are being considered for future versions of Cubase? I almost can't imagine it having something it doesn't already. So, they're already mapping out, Cubase versions well in advance and features that will come in a long time. Sometimes as features are integrated, it may be part of one part of a feature may be part of a broader palette of functionality that's coming. So, but usually we don't, talk about, stuff that's coming out in the future until it's released. So we'll avoid the anticipation factor. So. Okay, reading through questions and comments. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, so I'm just seeing from Real Raven 2000 says Cubase and the crash is caused by pad shop sound, Angelic Pad. It used a built-in sample hold, which is gone in 10.5, sample and hold filter, which is gone in 10.5. Something shut down by the upgrade. So I'll just try it really quick here in my 11 and see. If I could recreate it on my system. Okay, let me just see if I get the name right. So I'm not sure if that's a factory preset or maybe it's a preset that's being that was done by a third-party company, but I don't think I have that particular preset. So let's say, so in just kind of looking at all the presets, I see Angel's Choir, Angelic Ether, but I don't see Angelic Pad. But let me know, maybe it's I don't have all of the Pad Shop expansions, but if you could figure out which expansion it's in, that would be helpful. Okay, so just seeing kind of probably a further comment, but I need to map another sample kit. Question is to transform the fixed MIDI notes in real time to other notes. So probably this sounds like maybe discussing our drum editor. So let's take a quick look at that. Or I'll just... So once we have the drum editor open, this is what you could try. So let's say I'll assign this to just a generic drum map. So if we have a drum map that's set up, open up the drum editor, and if you slide this over, you can have what we call I note and O note. So if you're playing like one sound, so let's say this is a kick in one on the original set, but it's not playing back the correct sound. So once you have it mapped to a drum note, you'll get these options in the drum editor. And now we could just kind of take these different sounds and say every C1 play an E1, every D1 play an F sharp 1, and we could remap these particular pitches. And once that's all set up in the drum editor, we could do this in the bottom zone here. We could select a track, and you could go to the map, go to the drum map setup, and just save it as, this is this drum set to this drum set, and that will save all of the routing for you. So let me know if that works. All right, and we see Gareth has made the live stream. Thanks for joining. We just need Pablo for the Hot Mess reunion. All right. All right, so we just see a question. Hey, Greg, in an EDM track, where's the best place to put a drop for the kick when the leads come in? I don't listen to a lot of EDM music, so I could probably be like not the best person to ask, but let's see. All right, so let's say, so the best place to put a drop. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, I don't listen to EDM all the time. When the lead, so where's the best place? I think if it's like more of a musical solution, it could vary. But obviously people kind of want that little bit, that build up and attention, and maybe like, like after the rise, and the drop, and then just to have something, to kind of after creating tension. I often think of music in, different genres, or it's classical jazz or rock or EDM, you kind of have tension and release. So, I think as long as you have the release and maybe you bring the kick in after that, but, I'm not, if you send me a link to a track, I may be able to give you kind of an idea, but, I think, having tension and release is always a good thing to keep in mind in just about any musical genre. All right, so we just see from Real Raven says one thing I'm missing in export is the ability to export instruments as MIDI tracks. So the export is primarily for audio for delivery, but you could always just come over here and export. You could choose to export the MIDI file and import the MIDI file, so it's not part of the channel export, but you can export the MIDI file. One thing, if you wanted to, says I could open in 10.5, remove the offending track, and then reopen in 11. I could surely export the MIDI somehow and rebuild somehow, and something that you might be able to do also if you're having one particular preset that's causing problems is, come over here and, maybe save it as just to disable the track and save it. And then, copy, even though the track is disabled, you could still copy the parts to another track and then just simply replace it with a different sound and, take all the parts and just move it to the new track and then just disable that particular track. All right, so we have Music All Day checking in from Michigan. Thanks for joining the live stream. All right, so we see when's 11.5 coming out, Uncle Greg. So, most people know that I can't really talk about stuff until it's actually out. So, or I'll have a bunch of German people really mad at me and they'll just come back right to this live stream as evidence. So we see when is Cubase 17 coming out. So, when it's ready. Soon. All right. Okay, so we see, Greg, can Nuendo use a reference track for EQ? So really all you'd have to do, if you set up a reference track, so, there is just a plugin that you could use that's included, and this is kind of like an EQ matching plugin. So if I wanted to come over here to Inserts, you'll see the Voxengo Curve EQ. So if you wonder why that's in there, it's specifically for this function. So if we go to the mode here, we want to set this to average. And then you'll see kind of like static and match. So if you play one audio file, we can click on take, and then you do another audio file, and then click on take again. And then you can say, this is the reference, and apply it to this other file. So this way, then you could match the EQs. So you could do that in Nuendo as well right there. Let's see how we're doing on time. All right, so about where I thought we'd be. So thanks for all the wonderful questions. To see kind of an interesting question. Why are there British trendsetters in popular music? Spaniards, Italians, even Germans. Where are the musical people? So. All right, so we see Pablo has made the live stream, so we have the whole Hot Mess ensemble here. So glad you could join us, Pablo from Galicia, España. Okay, so we see from Graham, says, hi Greg, can I have the EQ transferred from individual tracks of the mixer from the Groove Agent? So I'll show you a trick. So let's say if I have a Groove Agent track, and we could do this with the Acoustic Agent. So let's say if I'll do it on a new project, so it could be more obvious. All right, so let's say I come into the mixer here, and I've adjusted EQs, my levels. Okay, so we have everything kind of playing through one Groove Agent pattern here. So let's say I want to take the snare, and I just wanted to add more highs. So if you actually click on, if I wanted to copy all of these settings, let's say, with, compression. So I'll come over here, activate the compressor. So it's like, okay, as we're playing along, so, and if you just right click on the agent itself, we could export mixer and effects to Cubase. And what this will do is take all the mixer settings directly from there and automatically export it directly into Cubase. So we could think of like the plugins within Groove Agent, the EQs, the envelope shaper, compressor, all those functions are kind of subset of the Cubase plugin. So it'll just automatically marry those over and create them into right into the Cubase mixer, Graham. See Pablo saying he needs a big coffee. You can't say you need a coffee when I still have an hour to go, Pablo. You should know that. Come on. Thanks, Jazz Dude, for doing some moderation for us here. Appreciate that. All right, so we just see from question. I haven't managed to run Cubase 11 and Cubase 10.5 connecting to two different Steinberg two different Steinberg hardwares, UR824 and URC44 at the same time. The ASIO driver can only handle one hardware at a time. So I could try it out. If you want to email me, I could try it out on my system, on my personal studio system. I have two different UR interfaces connected on there. I think the URs, they might have kind of like a shared driver architecture. So you may have to do like a little bit of defining which interface, but I could give it I'd be happy to try it out on my end on my studio PC. I just have one interface connected here, one of the UR interfaces. But if you want to email me, realraven2000 at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to kind of get it set up as well on my end and see if there's a trick. Okay, so I just see a question. When editing MIDI, when I deleted a note, all the other notes shifted back. It took me a minute to realize that I had to hit the snap button to turn something off. What is that about? So... Okay, there's my cool drum beat that Gareth is going to steal now. All right. So let's say when I delete a note here, so I have snap turned on. So, it could depend. I'll undo that. So let's say if I delete, I'll make this note longer here. So when I delete, I'm just hitting the delete key or the backspace key. If I erase, the other notes stay intact. I wonder if we come over here and say, just delete, that doesn't seem to do it. I know, like, if we had like the range that we could, let's see if there's, like on the project window, we could do, if we do, let's say just an edit in place. I mean, this kind of sounds like what's going on. So let's say if we come here and if I delete it, notes, let's say if I go to the range tool and I go to the selected range and say, cut time, that those notes get shifted back, but I can't necessarily, so in the normal key editor, there isn't a range tool for that to happen. So I'm not sure what could be causing that. Usually it just will automatically, leave the other notes in place, but let me know if I'm doing something differently. All right, so we have a question. What is this, and when we need this, activate Steinberg audio power scheme? So this is something that we see on a Windows platform. So I don't have it, but when you get to the audio system, you'll see the activate Steinberg audio power scheme. So what happens is a lot of time we have, tons of people that are running Cubase on laptops. And the biggest one huge criteria for laptop metrics is battery life. So what a lot of laptops end up doing is as you're working is they will throttle the CPU so that the computer isn't working as hard, and that makes the battery last longer because the processor isn't working as hard. So that could extend the life of your battery. So that's great on a battery battery life metric, but it's not necessarily good for real-time audio processing because basically you're using 60%, 40% of your computer's power. So while in Cubase, if you use the Steinberg audio power scheme, that will make sure that your laptop CPU isn't slowed down to to be green or eco or to make the battery last longer. So that's what that function is. So that makes sure that your CPU is being fully utilized and your CPU doesn't get slowed down for power management reasons. So see a question, Greg, can you sync two DAWs on the same computer? So yeah, some people would in the old days would run Rewire to do that. Some people still use MIDI timecode to go between different DAWs on the same computer. So you can, it doesn't often get you much. Used to be some people would use to kind of split up resources on one computer and realize that running two different DAWs took more resources than having everything within one program. So it's not often used, but you could definitely do it, and you could synchronize, via Rewire or using MIDI timecode as well. Okay, so we just have a question, two questions. When copying multiple audio files to a track project, is there a way to have all the WAV files populate the lanes of a track? For example, a vocal comp. All right, so let me just go over here real quick. Let's go to this project. Okay, so let's say if I copy this over, that will, preserve. Let me just. So let's say I have this over it and I want to copy those events, and now when I go to my lanes, so it could depend how it's recorded, but let's say if I just want to copy those, because in essence, this was all recorded in kind of a cycle. So this could be one. Let me just set up a new project here. I'll just do a couple quick recordings. All right, so let's say if I copied all of these, so it looks like you may have to manually copy, and if you are doing, if you wanted to copy, you just kind of, into lanes, you may have to just kind of start, let's say, I don't think there's an automated way of doing this, but you could say, okay, take this and drag it into, let's see if we could drag it to different lanes. Or let's see if you can, if you just drag it on top. So let's see if there's a, I'll just do this on a brand new project just to make sure. And let me just, could be my preference that we had from our very first question that's causing this behavior. Let me just choose to not do delete overlaps. So it looks like you could just kind of, you may have to manually drag it into lanes, but it looks like that all kind of works as expected. But make sure you don't have delete overlaps and make the operator error that I did. All right, so we had another question. How can I add my own MIDI pattern files to the media bay? All right, so let's say if I have an instrument track, so we need to do this with an instrument track. So let's say we'll come over here. Okay, so at that point, all you have to do and then you select it, and then you could choose to export a MIDI loop, and then this MIDI loop could automatically show up. And then you could just open it from Media Bay and drag and drop. So just export as MIDI loop. Okay. It says, we have a question. I work mostly with Groove Agent as my drum, but most of the presets / kits lack of samples, i.e. each pad only has one sample on it instead of 5. So drums options are narrower. Can I know where to look for this rich samples kits before loading the kit? There are many libraries, you know. So, you know, if you're looking for kits with lots of sample layers, I would probably look in like the kit in that library. And if you look in probably some of the early ones, so let's come over here to Groove Agent SE. I would, when I go to load a kit with patterns, I would probably choose like, you know, like the Studio SE kit would be a great place to go, and also the kit. So let's say if I go to the kit, we can come right over here. We can load this up. And now that we have this, you know, this will have many different velocity layers. You may not see it, but the acoustic agent kits can have, I think they can have up to 32 velocity layers. So as you kind of work with it, so look for those. Probably the older ones may, if we look at probably like groove agent kits, while some of them may still sound great, they may not be as velocity rich as others. So like one of the ones I use for this is like Maple Kit CD, and we'll take a look here. And we can see that we have 2 velocity layers, 3 velocity layers for the snare. So you could see how many velocity layers there are so the hi-hat, can have 8 velocity layers. So you can have, I think, 32 velocity layers, but, as soon as you kind of click on like a beat agent kit, you could see how many layers there are there. But check out like the kit or the Studio SE samples, the acoustic agents, and they generally will have more velocity layers. Okay, so we see the Tyro Pirate just says, who has not smashed the thumb? Let's get it over to 100 likes. So that's always a great place to be. So I just see VST Connect Pro does not do the same as Listen to. So I think you could, basically, if someone has VST Connect Performer, you could send a mix to them, just like Listen to, except it's free with Cubase. So I think you can. I'm not a Listen to expert, but if you wanted to share your mix, someone could just download VST Connect Performer and listen to it. All right, so we just see a question. Hey, Greg, is M1 native support coming in Cubase 12? So again, I generally can't talk about features until the program is released. So, but it would be nice. So I think, it's a significant amount of work. So I'm sure someone has thought of it. Okay, so we just see, hi Greg, versions to Cubase SX allowed a stop command to be placed in the timeline. Playback would automatically stop where the stop command was placed. Is there any alternative for the same function? So I know you can do kind of like a lot of people will do I think if we go to the transport, that you could do like a play project range, and you could play, have it play the selection range. So what a lot of people do is, in a project, you may just say, right, didn't like my VST Connect setup. See if I, sometimes my IT stuff at my company makes it a little. Just see if I get this back. I may have to reboot my system real quick. Try one thing here. All right, I'm gonna just reboot my computer real quick. Everyone just hang on for a minute or two. Sorry about this. All right, so I may just do a quick reboot, and I have a kind of a long boot time with our IT security stuff, so I'm just gonna reboot. So just hang on, and we'll get right to that question. All right, I'm going to do a quick test to see if we're back here. Sorry about that. And I'm going to do just a quick audio test again, make sure everything is okay. Okay, so audio, so sorry about that. So once again, we can just come over here and, you know, just play the selection range. So if I just have my, you know, left and right locators set like around the particular range, I could just, you know, say, you know, range, and then you could just say play to, you know, like just play the particular range, or it's under the transport menu, sorry. So say, let's play project range, and then it will just, when we get to the very end, it will just automatically, you know, play until the selection start, play to end, and you can set up keyboard shortcuts for all of that. Okay, just reading through more comments. Sorry about the interruption there. Okay, so we see that the preset was Dreaming Gates. So let's see if we... Let's just check my audio connections here quickly. Okay, so I'll just... I'll just try a quick export audio mixdown, see if it's behaving the same on my system. I'll just export just a section that has audio in it. So. All right, so no problems there. But one thing to try, Real Raven 2000, is maybe if you go to Media Bay, just out of curiosity, and if you go to Factory Content, then go to, or VST Sound, and then maybe look under Pad Shop. You know, and then just at this point, try just, you know, rescanning the disc and see if that makes any difference. Maybe it's not finding the file in Cubase 11. It was in 10.5. Okay, so just see a question. Is there a way to export audio mixdown window to export audio as different file types at the same time? So if I wanted to do this, so we could, in version 11, they added the capability of doing export cues. So if I want, I could take this and when I do an export audio mixdown, we can say, okay, I want this as a WAV file, and then we'll see export queue, and I'll say add to queue. And then I wanted this as a 24-bit WAV file, add to queue. I want this as a 16-bit WAV file, or a 16-bit AIF file, add to queue. So now at this point, I could start to queue export. It will go through and export multiple files in different sample rates, file formats, bit depths, all at once. And then also with that is, can I export stereo and interleaved? So let's go ahead and take a look. So yes, we could do that as well. So let's remove these 3 tracks. And let's say I do my export audio mixdown. I have these cues, and now I wanted to do a wave, 16-bit, 48K, split channels, add to queue. And I wanted to do a wave, 32, 64-bit floats, you know, interleaved. And then once again, add to queue, come right over here, we'll export, and so we can see our interleaved as well as our split files all could be done simultaneously. All right, so I just see, hey, Greg, if I open a new project without closing what I have opened before, does that project bypass? So when you open a project, so let's say if I come here and I open a project, so let's say I'll go to Bicycle here, we'll often get this little message. So when I go to open a project, it says, do you want to activate the project? So if I choose no, this project is still active, but this project will open up. If I say activate the project, this project becomes activated and the previous one is inactive, but it doesn't close the project. All right, so we see that we're at 126 likes at this point in the discussion, so that's great. Thank you so much. And we see nice comment from Alice, and quality live stream deserves all the likes. Thank you for the kind words. All right, so we see from Gareth, could you demonstrate situations where you would need to use the direct routing tab? Okay, so let's say I have like all of my effect sends, like it's a complicated mix, and I have all of my effect sends going on and they're being used, and I need to send perhaps let's say I'm going to add 2 group channels here. All right, and I have, chorusing and reverb, and I can't really utilize the group channels for effect send. So I want to select all of my drum tracks and I want to do parallel processing. So at this point, what I could do is, and we have this concept of direct routing. So we could go to the racks and make sure that direct routing is enabled, and we're going to activate it here. And when we go to this little drop-down menu, this is a critical step. We want to make sure that direct routing summing mode is on. So you want to make sure that that is checked. So now we could route all of my drum channels so all my sends are being used, let's say for side chaining, for effects. So now at this point, I want to route these all to group 1, and I'll do just a quick link so that it'll make sense this time. So all my drum channels can now be routed to group 1 and to group 2, and I'm going to activate both these destinations. So when I go to play the project, all the drums will now go through. All right, so let's say we have group 2. So let's say I'll activate group 1 now. All right, and let me select all the channels here, and I want to, once again, activate these on group 1 as well. So now as we play, I can now send to both destinations. And let's say I'm going to do like a parallel compression, but I really want this only to all right, so this one is like really parallel, but what's kind of cool about this is I could now come over here and automate. So let's say right at this point, I wanted to select all of my drums, and at one point I don't want it to go through the parallel bus. So I'll just automate those changes. So at this point, you could use the kind of direct routing. You could automate the changes to direct routing, or, when, again, your sends are being used. So this just allows you kind of more kind of parallel routing options. All right, so we have Chris Hallam checking in from directly from Columbia, South Carolina, watching while he's working. We won't tell your boss, but we're happy you're here. Okay, so we just see, hello, Greg, question. How to, after rendered in place, and put all tracks in one folder and unload VSTIs at the same time, a macro. So, you know, if we come over here, let's just do this quickly. And you can do this for multiple tracks as well. So... okay, so I'll do my 21st century composition here. All right, so if I have the track selected, not the events, but the track, and we go to edit to render in place, we go to render settings, and when the track is selected, we get some the source track settings. So here I could choose to remove the selected track, or if I wanted to just come over here and disable it. So let me just all right, I'm just going to reread and unload the VST. So I'm going to say just disable the source tracks. So if I do that, then it's going to render the file and the source tracks get disabled and unloaded. If you really wanted to commit to it, we could also just, you know, like to make it really, we'll call it Homer Simpson proof, that when we go to the edit menu, we can go to our range and we do our render in place, that we could remove the source tracks, and then the MIDI information is kind of gone forever and it just migrates directly into just an audio file. All right, so I know we had a couple of questions, not many, that were sent in advance, so let's make sure we get to those. Thanks for all the wonderful questions and discussions. All right, so first question we had, is it possible to have multiple tempo tracks within a project? So we have one active tempo track at a time. So let's say if I'm here and I have this tempo track, and we see this often kind of with composers, and they may want to try out different tempo ideas. So if you're doing this and, oh, maybe if I speed it up or slow it down here and let me start fresh. But the trick is we could just go to the tempo track and we could say, we could have track versions. So I could just have different tempo tracks and try out different ideas and different variations of different tempos. And then you could, of course, combine those. So you could say, okay, let's go to tempo track 1. You say, oh, I like that. Or I just wanted to go to tempo track version 2 or tempo track version 3. And this would allow you to kind of toggle back and forth between the different ones. Okay, another question that was sent in. It says, if I have a project with 10 tracks with 2 or 3 plugins, each the system performance meter goes 100% with buffer size set at 1024 and ASIO guard activated. I freeze all tracks, but system performance meter is still at 100%. Shouldn't it decrease? How do I release the plugins? How is it possible that all track freezes? It doesn't reduce the CPU load. I have a Ryzen 5 with 16 gigs of RAM in the PC. So, you know, depending on, you know, what instruments are being used, that could be kind of the issue. You know, like you might be just kind of at the edge, like, you know, if you're running, you know, a Hallian patch with 16 sounds that make up one sound, you might be kind of pushing your memory, but, I'm not sure if you're choosing to, I would try to, render in place just like we just showed. So I'm not sure if you're freezing the track, but you could also, one other thing that you could do is, let's say if we do have your instruments in your rack, I tend to work more of utilizing render in place and disabling automatically. But one of the things that you could do here is try also just to freeze the instrument and see, so let's say if I'm here and I have a lot of, now we could just freeze the instrument and see if that makes a difference. But, it could be, you generally freezing would, take away the CPU usage and you should see it. But if it's, if maybe one plugin has a memory leak and your memory's totally shot, that might cause some performance issues after freezing where maybe it just doesn't release the particular plugin. All right, so that was our questions. We have a couple more minutes. Let's see if we get a couple quick questions in. I see Sable is calling me a living legend, and Pablo is calling me La Leche. So thank you. It's very kind. And Jazz Dude saying, and we have great questions. That's what makes these live streams really great. It's all the wonderful questions and people learning from other people's questions. See Mark Raven just saying, hope you had a great birthday. So he did. I kind of spent, most of the actual birthday on the live stream and doing the index late that night, but I got an old bass kind of set up that I've been wanting to get worked on. So I feel like I got a new bass for my setup cost for kind of an old ESP fretless. It was like my high school graduation gift. So it was great to have that instrument back and playing in top form. It's a great quote from Sable. This is the most productive, unproductive 4 hours of my day, but I'm hooked. So that's good. Thanks, Sable. It's always better when Sable is on the live stream. So I see from Jan, the global mutant solo, is there a way to undo? So I think it's just going to be so let's say if I have like these tracks and then we just add some audio tracks here. All right, so let's say I have some of these soloed. So there may be in the project logical editor when we come over here. So we can say container type is equal to track, and let's say property is, so let's say track operation mute, and let's try toggle. So with this, we could come over here and maybe, I think sometimes people are, so let's say if I come here and undo let's say I toggle the behavior, and let's say if I undo, let's see if I come here, let's toggle and let's see if I undo. Yeah, so it doesn't seem, let me just try one more thing here. So let's say I untoggle or unmute, apply that, and let me try Alt Z, So it doesn't seem like it's in the undo or mix console undo history, but I can play around with it a little more. All right, let's see how we're doing on time. So I think we're just about out of time. Thank you for all the great questions. It's wonderful to see new faces on the live stream. We hope to see more people. And again, we do this on Tuesdays and Fridays, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. I think the European and American clocks are kind of in sync again this week. So thanks again for all the wonderful questions, and we'll see everyone back on Friday, hopefully. And you can send questions to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and look forward to seeing everyone on Friday afternoon. Thank you very much.